All right. So you know when you're eating a bag of pistachios and you come across that one that's a little burnt and chipped and rotten and it looks like bugs have nibbled at and you open it up and it's all gross looking, but you go ahead and you eat it anyway and it's a little bit tart and tangy and sour and it kind of wakes you up a little bit and it actually tastes kind of good compared to all the other pistachios that you've been eating in the bag. Well, that's me. That's me in the world. You can't buy a whole bag of those. It'd be disgusting. But I figure the people that are interested in what I'm doing are can relate to that. And I'm making this series of videos to go through hypermodernity and the psychological impacts upon us and then the mutations that are occurring within the individual and collective psyche. But I'm also trying to pass the baton because I've gone as far as I really can as, an individual with a family and a career and a house and a life and I'm working on my art project and like there's only so much I can do, but other people will be able to really run with what it's more important to me that the ideas get out there more than it is I find seven different ways to make money from this. I'm not doing any of this to make money. This is like very old school internet what I'm doing. it, it's kind of funny in that way, but okay. So probably be a little bit of a meandering video here, but it's very deep. I do have a bunch of notes, and I'm just gonna sort of get right into it. We'll catch you up on a couple of things too. So I did the hypermodern art piece, and I talked about hypermodernity and what it is about 9 months ago or so. I also last month finished reading Hypermodern Times by Giles Lipovetsky. He created the term hypermodernity in 2005 in this book, and it's really good. Everything that I've been doing on X, which is where my artistic self, my artistic sort of display to the world exists, it's also where I created these terms. Um, there's many levels there. I've got something like 25 different identifiable points to this epoch and things that it's doing, and they're very similar to the things that he points out in the book. In fact, I don't think there's anything unique in there that I have not shown. Now, it's crazy because this stuff hasn't happened yet. And so it's a great sort of parallel between he's writing about all this 20 years before it actually comes to fruition, and I'm able to show the things that he's talking about. Anyway, so there's that, and then over the summer I took John David Ebert's class in hypermodernity, which was a series of lectures John gave, and he also wrote a book called Hypermodern Times. It's available on YouTube. It's very good, and he's working on a second book on hypermodernity, and great exposition of all the cultural and philosophical parts to this. My contribution is really in the technical side, and then as an artist, I'm working to become the hypermodern epoch as well as develop a new art form. And so part of it is I have written a play, and the play is several acts. It's very unique. I'm not going to go through much of it here, but I'm going to try to bring all these things together. And so last thing I'll show you, this is a new piece I just finished, and this is really to show you the technologization of the psyche that's occurring within the epoch. The great thing is there's a little switch here that's on, and you cannot turn it off. And so all of my art pieces are made from, they're also props for the show, but they've been remade from various things in my life. This is actually a toenail from my son. This was a wart that was on his foot as well, because part of this is also a tribute to David Hahn. David was the nuclear Boy Scout. If you're unfamiliar with his story of building a nuclear reactor in his backyard, which was called in a huge federal response in 1994, and it mutated him at the same time. So this is actually this top part is actually latex. And if you look at some pictures of his face, they're all like broken out. So I kind of did that here. Oh yeah, and I also added like some, it glows. There we go. I added glow paint on the skin part, but not on the lower part. So if you hit it with a black light or a lot of light, like it glows in the dark. So very cool. I'm trying to use the Atman or Aten, the Egyptian sun with all the hands coming down, as the sort of piece that I can top and sort of hang it with something like that. But it's a great segue into what I want this sort of introduction piece to be about, which is technology itself as a disunified chain reaction. And so don't think about technology as a pendulum that swings back and forth, or I'll remember some of the other like common metaphors. But really, I use the nuclear symbol because that is a chain reaction, an unstable chain reaction. And the only way that we stabilize it and control it to extract the energy from it. But without all the mechanisms to do that, and there's quite a few, basically in about an hour, if you were to shut the power down at a nuclear facility, within about an hour, you would have a total catastrophic meltdown of the cores in a huge chain reaction that would spread uncontrollably, right? And that then begins to mutate the various things around it. And so that's how I think about technology and the hypermodern epoch. And different countries are reacting to it in different ways, and different peoples are being exposed to it at different times. I placed the start of the epoch in 1971 with the digitization of the NASDAQ. These are things you cannot go back from. That's why the pendulum metaphor is a bad metaphor for talking about technology. There's no swinging back once you digitize your entire financial market. So, but like all epochs, there are motives behind it. And so this hypermodern epoch, one of them is the technologization of the psyche. That's why I put the circuit boards at the top of the head. And there's a sort of asymptote of the human qualia. We're reducing the amount of humanness in the world, in the things that we create, in the things that we manage especially. And this is done by energy exfiltration. It takes the energy out of the cyberspace, and it uses various chronographic techniques. So there's different sort of time push notifications, data, you're contributing things. And now we have this sort of AI somnambulism, fancy word for sleepwalking, but I like it. It's the AI somnambulism putting you into sleep as you extend your psyche into cyberspace. Once you're psychologically in cyberspace, you can exert sort of retrochronic control across the various temporal layers of being and provide all the people that are there with actually the same powers and the same exposure at the same time. All right. I know that sounds weird and crazy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining that, but listen to that a few times if there's a lot there. But here's what what it comes down to in terms of the motives of hypermodernity. So I've talked about technologizing your psyche, image as theology. The image really is the doctrine of faith within these technological systems. Bar charts, media clips, cityscape photographs, anything that you can bring into image form, that's the dominant. Also, literacy and readings, that's how people look at the world, through a series of symbols and images more than ever before. It's the text, the printing press and text is losing to the dominance of the image and the condensed image symbol. And I've actually pointed out what are sort of hyper pictographs that have come out. And they're condensed images of things that go on inside of the cyberspace. And then the last one is it's constructing a cage without bars. The machine never says no to you. It becomes your own private hall of mirrors, and it's a cybernetic system where the outputs then become the inputs, and that energy supply keeps going, and it's going basically until it can exhaust this energy, and these motives pretty much run out with something else. And what the something else is, I don't know. But what I place us at is about 10 a.m. And that's my metaphor of, the early sunrise to daybreak. And I'll go through that another time. But I put us at about 10 a.m. We're not yet to the hottest part of the day. We're probably not going to get to the hottest part of the day until I continue to see quantum computing become more widespread, things that actually are manipulating trinary bits and probabilistic bits, and those are starting to come out. But also the biological manipulations that things like CRISPR-Cas9 can do, and other sort of programs like that, and a lot more sort of biological engineering to take place. There's a term, pharmacopornographic. If you've never heard of it before, it was written about in the 1990s. And it's kind of about taking, additional drugs to change your body as well as your mind. Anyway, it's an interesting thing, but so there will be some things in digital ID. There will be state uses of technology, AI as predominantly a weapon, which we're seeing continually be developed. That's how I think about it, as primarily a weapon material, and how that gets leveraged. And so we're not yet to the hottest part of the day where people really have grappled with most of that. We're still in the sort of ascent. All right, nonetheless, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. So what is this doing to us psychologically? And I put out the terms self-nostalgia, which is this psychological distress that is brought upon you through this forced technologization of your psyche, and you feel homesick for that inner world of experiences and privacy and individuation that was unmediated by all these technical tools. The other one is hyperlectics, and that is the many voices, many dialogues, this unending second order observation that you always have to have. That's this sort of performative inner voice needing validation for your profilicity, your curation of your public image, the patronage from digital audiences, the algorithms, all these observers now, even if the observers and the eyeballs are real or digital, this creates in you the many voices, many dialogues. It's a sort of second order monologue of meta self talk. And there's different levels to that, and I'll kind of go through that when I do the video on it. And then there's the addiction accelerationist part of this. And I'm using the word accelerationism just as sort of like common use of the word. It just is unceasing, and it's pushing forward, and it's turning the entire society, well, it has turned the entire society into addicts, and it's turning the entire civilization into addicts, actually. And so it's unchecked, addictive behaviors. It's extremely I don't know what the word, I'm losing track of thought here, but it's like it makes you pursue vice, right? It's dopamine driven anticipation. It's eroding human agency. It's precipitating a broader collapse in a retreat totally into fantasy. I mean, this is not surprising to anyone. You can see it. You can, like, the massive retreat underway into fantasy as correlated with the breakdowns of reality is no accident. And so that's the sort of addiction accelerationism part, and more to say on that. But I know I'm kind of jumping all around here, but I wanted to at least get the definitions of the words out there, and then go back to the let's talk about technology now. All right, so as I've been, exploring these ideas over long periods of time, and driven by a series of questions that I have had, like, where am I? What's happening around me? And I can't remember. Oh, where do the things that I consume go? And these may sound weird, but artists are often driven by very simple, bizarre questions like this. This is not uncommon. But that's why my art is all made from parts of my life. It's things so everything I would have thrown away, I take apart. And it's all why my office is a total mess here. And I've got boxes full of, parts and scrap and things that I've dismantled that are cool that I keep. And I've been doing this part, building the props, for about 5 years. And it did become an obsession, and I'm throwing stuff away now. But it's crazy because by doing that, I learned so much about how awful things are put together that I never would have otherwise learned. It's and everybody knows this, the things that you own right now are not repairable. They're all replaceable. And this is part of a really bad acceleration trend of more energy, more resources going into more material that goes into more useless, junk and scrap heaps and stuff. And it's I paid $100 for this really nice Brookstone clock. It had a touch screen. It had sunlight. It had different meditation and sound waves on it. And it just stopped working one day. There's no reason it stopped working. I looked online and people just report this problem. One day the clock doesn't work. And there's no way to repair it. There's no new model made of it. And as I took it apart, it is completely made to not be repaired. To actually open it, you have to destroy it. And there's so many things like that, from your coffee makers and just other things that And I posted about this. There actually was an article this year. It's not so. It's not your imagination. Things actually are made worse. It was actually provable that they're being made worse. They're being made more disposable. And these are like big ticket items as well. But yeah, it's all sort of anyway. So okay, my explorations there, some of my questions, and then going through it in writing and art and literature and life and play, discussion, dialogue, discourse. These are my distillations coming out here. I really try to say things that are as true as it's bad for your eyes to stare at the sun. I don't need a advanced degree in astrophysics to make that truth claim. It's testable. It's obvious. You can verify it very quickly. Like, that's what I try to distill things down into in everything that I do. And so that's what I'm trying to distribute here. But it's not unquestionable. Like, anything I say, you can disagree with it. And I'd like to know what I have wrong, There's no hubris here. Like, I'm trying to figure this out. So, all right. Unity versus disunity. And the stories we have about unity in religions, like Islam with the rock, the stone, the Kaaba, the Black Pearl, the temple, the mosque. There's a unity in the whole of the narrative. And in Christianity, there's an arborescent tree unity in the roots and the wood and the carpentry and the cross. And there's unity in the language, the mycorrhizal part of root systems, and then even webs. There's unity in the web. What do all these things have in common is they all have boundaries. They all have a distinct set of boundaries, whereas technology does not. There is not a boundary to it. It is a immense chain reaction that, like the financial system that I was talking about, you can't go back and turn it off. It goes from that all the way to someone makes an anonymous post on a forum on Halloween 2008 and creates Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is another massive chain reaction of energy, which actually, it kind of makes it clear that money is energy exchanged. It's actually all of history, all the material, the energy that has come from the sun. It's all the energy really from the great oxidation event put into a fungible way that we can exchange that energy. And debt is awaiting to be repaid with energy expenditure. So if I give you $10,000, I'm expecting a repayment at least back to $10,000, and you're going to have to spend energy to actually do that. And this is all the same thing with the Bitcoin system. It's just that the energy is the proof of work, proof of stake. The machines have to work out the coin entries into the ledger, the digital ledger. And so we have this whole new technology, right, that comes up with the blockchain, and it's posted anonymously. But it has created this massive chain reaction of industries going into artwork, and NFTs and blockchains and verifiability and being part of the web and Web3, right? So there's this massive chain reaction which you really cannot now undo. So the idea of a blockchain is now out there. We have a currency attached to it. We have code. And it's so, just to give you an example of like the disunity in technology that can kind of occur. And yeah, like I get that there's a sort of I would say it's a very weak rebuttal to what I'm saying, to just take a chronological view of it all and say, yes, but this had to happen. You had to have the dual-sided printable circuit board, and then you have to have the transistor, and you have to have the microprocessor, and then computers have to be powerful enough to be able to run this software. So it's really not disunified. It's unified through a series of steps, and you have to have forums, you have to have modems and internet connectivity. Okay, like, yeah, I mean, I take the point there. There's a lot of truth to that. But also, you can just start these things and sort of blast them out there. Like I'm following closely the whole bit chat, and it's poised to really do something special by using Bluetooth and mesh networks as the primary means to transmit messages. But it's struggling to gain adoption, and not everything succeeds right out of the gate. But like, it would be really interesting to have a sort of parallel internet, and like, there's no reason why we can't have something like that. Now, back to the other stuff I've said about hypermodernity, we're getting into a point now where you have the cybernetic layer where the hardware and the software and the apps all run, cyberspace. Then you have PSY space, the psychological space that we're talking into now, where most of our knowledge work is done, and so forth. And then you have state space, the sort of holistic container, which will be the super intelligent AI and surveillance mechanisms and camera networks, as well as debanking and punishments and rules. And like, there will be a super organism in itself, in a way, a technological superstructure that's going to encompass, the internet as a whole. But like, so when I was talking about different nations, and I've been following a lot with Australia, Germany, the UK, Ireland, Canada, they're all really creeping into soft totalitarianism. We've been able in the United States to sort of keep a lot of that at bay. But they're really, they're punishing people for photographs, for language, for you have to be 16 to get on social media in Australia. They want to have digital IDs. They want to have an online ID. There's a lot going on there. But like, so I do in my mind picture like hypermodernity as this sort of monolith that just like drops out of the sky, but it's encased with circuitry and a sort of weird biological and technological structure, and it starts pumping into the ground, and as it does, like, it fractures and it comes out and it sort of destroys and mutates the things that are around it. And that's kind of what I view as what's, at least creatively, metaphorically, a way of watching what's happening at these different locations. Is they've had these things kind of come upon them. They didn't so much build it from the ground up. It came down into their reality, and now we're all, stuck with it. And everyone's always saying, well, we can't turn around, we have to go through it. I think that's totally wrong. I think the idea, I get that people want to sell hope. But like, there's the hopeful and the hopeless, and then there's I have done away with hope. The light at the end of the tunnel may very well be a candle at the end of the cave, and you would have done best to actually turn around while you had the energy and resources, rather than try to endlessly go on and go forward foolishly into exhaustion. Unfortunately, my metaphor is not going to win the day. And so, like, we are going to go foolishly into exhaustion. We're going to probably destroy most of the material resources of Earth as we superciliously post images and take trips and fly in aircraft and build more airports. And, like, you know, the whole crux of my philosophy on a lot of this stuff is nothing fancy. I look at the world and I basically say, is this gonna start, stop, or continue? Right? And, like, is it going up? Is it going to increase, decrease, or stay the same? Are airports next year going to increase, decrease, or stay the same? They're going to increase. They're going to keep increasing. We're not going to build less airports. The airport's a great thing I'll be talking a lot about, because it's this sort of like isolated government. Nobody elects who runs it. It sort of runs on its own, yet it has some administrative state that oversees it. And, like, you lose your personhood when you enter it. Just like we've seen the technology sort of rolled out there first, in the airport, from, you know, automated walkways to plane tickets to, you know, pay at the kiosk to the vending machines. And, like, there's a lot of technology that rolls out at the airport first. Anyway, okay. All of this has led us into a spiritual crisis. I don't think there's any doubt that we are as these different countries, as this happens, what I'm talking about with the hypermodern monoliths, you can see the spiritual crisis sort of emerge in those cultures. Well, for me, that's a catalyst for a spiritual response, right? And I'm not trying to, like, write books and do interviews and podcasts and, like, become the market in a way. I'm a lot more interested in exploring, and my explorations and my art goes into a spiritual response. All the stuff that I'm doing is crypto-religious, right? There's a cross with the vaporizer and the dark black mirror intentionally, right? Addiction has become the center point. Addiction is the highest point in this art piece for a reason. It is the new religion. And anyway, there's a lot of religious symbols and things in what I'm doing. And yeah, I mean, you have to keep sane. So how are people talking about that is mostly through different forms of personalized purification rituals. And I don't want to mention names, but there's sort of people promoting a more of, like, simplification, sobriety, silence, anyway, I'm looking at my notes here, but you have to ward off the sort of statism that's growing. It's pretty obvious centralized control, like the nuclear reactor. If you can control this, you will gain a tremendous amount of power from it. So we can't resist the temptation. It's way too powerful. But people picking this sort of aesthetic-based response to it and acting like we can all just have a place that we go to we can have a computer room in the house, and we'll just go there every once in a while, and we'll just log on like we used to, and it won't be as extractive. Like, this is all fantasy. Like I said, you cannot turn this off. This cosmic dome that's come over us of an always on information system that endlessly produces various symbols and signifieds, and it's become reality itself in a lot of ways. And there's a symbiotic relationship between superorganism Earth and our presence in that superorganism, and the extension of our psychological self, where we're trying to create identities, and to be honest, a lot of people are just trying to make money. But there's different benefits to society and so forth. Um, like that's not going to get decoupled, right? That's not solvable when you're in that, and like your car has the so here's I made a little list of technology mediation that has come into your life really strongly just in like the last 10 years. Movie tickets, assigned seats, concert tickets, haircuts. You usually have to now book. I've had multiple places. You have to go online, sign in to get a haircut. Plane tickets, therapy online. Your friends, when they come to your house to pick you up, will text you, I'm here. They used to come to your door and ring the doorbell and you'd say hello and people come in and chit chat. GPS is another thing. The maps have been made. The terrain has been explored. You will use GPS. Like you'll plan your trips. It got rid of AAA and like triptychs, I think they were called. I used to use the old triptych, but yeah, and then it comes into you. So it's like when the software doesn't like it, if you post a link, then you won't post a link. You'll put your link in the comments. You will adjust to the way that the software and we say the algorithm, but it's designing and shaping you at the same time. So what I'm getting after with a lot of these terms and things is like you've begun to float yourself. You're detached yourself in this world of symbol systems and different things that you can believe in this sort of like virtual simulation. And I just made a couple of other quick notes here I'll go through. But like, let's see. All right, so yeah. All right, so I was talking about the retreat into fantasy that's underway, the addiction accelerationism part of this, the lotus eating, really, as Tennyson had written about in his poetry. The why struggle and toil when you can work taking, pictures of your body and posting them on the internet for 10 minutes or dressing up in, costumes or doing a little... It's all to, like, extract revenue from really a handful of suckers, but they're lonely people. It's really turned misery into a mode of production. And it's not stopping. Right? And like everyone's commenting on it. I sounded really weird talking about these ideas 5 years ago, but they're all sort of manifesting now, and everyone can see the surveillance state. I mean, you can just look up in any major city, and you can see the cameras. You can see more cameras coming in, and you're going to be tracked. They're going to put it in your car. You're going to be tracked on your phone. So these are all avenues for advertising to you. They're constantly bombarding you with, like, even the things that I pay to, even the people I pay to hear, pay to read or listen to, I can't even keep up with their content because they're pressured to give me a piece of content every month, right? They're pressured by the membership of their audience to keep producing. And I'm like, no. Like, I don't want your shit. And I've confronted people about this. I'm like, your writing is actually getting worse. I want this. I'm paying to get from you the best stuff that you have. I don't want your monthly, exposition or your monthly digest and diary on the state of the world. it takes a long time to make good content. And that's what we should be paying for. But that's not what the consumerist mindset is geared towards. Um, but nonetheless, okay. So the whole monetization part of this and the quantifying of every part of the human relationship is now at such a point of like complete absurdity. Um, but it's not just, it's like all life reduced to quanta is sort of the motto of the state in a lot of ways. And so, they're going to build government housing and they'll give you an EBT card for government food and you'll be able to go to the government grocery store and you'll be able to take the free public transportation with this little government ID that they give you. And you'll be, like I said, you'll be in a prison without bars. It'll seem like you're free. It'll seem like you have all these choices. But actually, the biggest one that I keep coming back to is your identity, your way of being in the world is actually being simultaneously reduced by all of this. Just like with GPS, you cannot go out and be an explorer. What are you going to explore? We've shot it all with LiDAR from planes and satellite imagery and yeah, you can go out and have a little fun with history and there's some YouTube channels I like where the guy has, lived in that mining town and that ghost mining town in California and tried to build it up into a little tourist thing. But okay, I mean, how many of those are left? 10? What are you going to explore? Well, part of it is we're exploring, space, we're exploring the universe, the natural world. There's a lot, just to counterbalance what I'm saying, but I'm talking about the stuff that's impacting most people on a daily basis. They feel defeated. They feel the dynamism and the vitality is just simply gone from a society going from windows to mirrors. And that's how we have shifted. We've gone from the postmodern, where there was mostly I view the biggest ascension of post-modernity as the mall, as the gallery, the galleria, the mall. And the malls were full of windows. And there was no particular meta-narrative. There was consumption and hedonism and, all the subcultures morphed into becoming the dominant cultures, which is what we have today. And there's no real subcultures left. So you have to create these pseudo subcultures and make up ways to sort of push against the system in a sort of false way, just like pseudo events that we create. They go hand in hand. You see a bunch of these non-news items, these things where you're really, this is a totally made up story. So there's a lot of that stuff kind of going on, and it's just to bring the correlation full circle. Then you have bots taking over the information viewing of online posts and likes and so it's not even people are reading this stuff. It's they have bot farms that push out things. So we're going from the window back to the private hall of mirrors, my personal identity. I define and talk a lot about foam in the eddy is what we are becoming. So there was a flow of life and we have kind of swirled off to the side and we're different little dirty bubbles that can only grow as big as the bubbles that we're next to, and there can't be any friction, and so there's a bunch of little tiny bubbles because nobody wants to pop anybody else, and we all should be living in a safe society and nobody should get offended, and we can't have monuments to George Washington, and we can't call it a Christmas tree, and we have to welcome our immigrant neighbors, and it's this is all statism. This is all centralized psychological control that it's come down, and people accept it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get that, like, you could make cases over the basic thing is like, and I'll bring this up later, but the leftist liberal YIMBY progressive has no defense against tyranny. So it's a kind of a end of conversation. Like, you cannot actually resist tyranny if it puts itself in front of you with a smile. You will go full in on it, and you have no resistance to it. All right. So speaking of tyranny, the tyranny of this infinite information system that's always on is that there's a locomotion and a mania. I'm reading James Hillman's Melancholia and Depression, which came out in 2024. It's really good. I mean, I suffer from this sort of thinking man's disease that he talks about in the book, where you do notice, like, it's a totally manic society that just, the self-reflection and contemplation, and people who just want to read books and, like, live a quiet life they're seen as weirdos. You're supposed to be exhausted from taking your vacation. Like, that's the expectation, is like, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation. Like, I run myself so ragged. I'm so in the mania. This is really the propaganda layer. When I talk about propaganda, I use it in, like, the strictest sense of the word, where you really don't know it has occurred. It has actually terminated your thoughts to even think that something could be different from the way that it is. And the fifth and sixth generation warfare that we're seeing play out in this battlefield of the internet, right, of cyberspace, the psychological domain. You're on a battlefield all the time, right? Whether you know it or not, people are essentially trying to constantly manipulate you and exhaust you. And so you're part of it is you come out with a forced opinion. Forced opinion over something is one of the worst things to happen to civilization. The fact that you think because something is happening, you have to have an opinion about it, and you can't abstain and be contemplative and say, I don't know, that's a sociological question. I'm not able to answer that. I mean, I watch these podcast people go before an audience and take questions that they are totally incapable of answering. I mean, it would almost be funny if I were independently wealthy with exorbitant amounts of free time to travel to people who do their little podcast and Q&A and ask them all kinds of bizarre questions at the Q&A session just to hear them give an answer, because they will never say, I don't know, that's a question outside of my, domain of knowledge, right? It's like, you're a talking head, you're a set of chattering teeth, and yeah. Anyway, I guess I'll kind of finish with this on the technology side. And we've overcrowded cyberspace. We have overcrowded the internet, liminal space, something Douglas Rushkoff thought was impossible. That, and like, I read all these people who, like Alvin Toffler never gets his due, but the author of Future Shock, and then he wrote a Magna Carta for the Information Age. I read it over the summer. It's written in 94, I think. It is addressing every issue we still have 30 years later. It really is. From intellectual property to copyright and copy and and culture and all this stuff. Anyway, it's like we really have not gone very far, but we've piled a bunch more people into this area. And so, all right, that is enough of an introduction to really getting at the terms. But I wanted to, yeah, spend some time on that so you could kind of understand where I'm coming from and how I think about this. And then I'll do a video explaining self-nostalgia, hyperlectics, and addiction accelerationism from here. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.